So, what's a school really for? Is it just a place to cram kids full of facts? Or is it something else entirely? Is it maybe about helping them discover the world and themselves on their own terms? We're going to explore that very question through the revolutionary vision of Maria Montessori. She was a doctor and an educator who had this incredible idea that education isn't about building a person from scratch, but about helping a life that's already there to unfold.
And this quote, wow, it cuts right to the core of the problem she was up against. When Maria Montessori looked at the schools of her day, she didn't see disciplined children. No, she saw individuals who were being annihilated. She saw the absolute crushing of the human spirit.
Okay, so to really get what she was doing, we first have to understand the world she was pushing back against. We need to picture the classroom of the early 1900s. And let me tell you, it wasn't a place built for life and movement. It was built for silence.
I mean, the furniture itself was basically a tool of control. Think about this. Children were literally locked into these things called orthopedic desks. The whole idea was to stop them from moving, supposedly to prevent bad posture. The goal was total immobility. The perfect student, the ideal, was silent, passive, completely obedient. Basically, an empty jar waiting to be filled, not a fire to be lit.
Montessori actually pointed to a story from a novel to illustrate this. It's about a little boy named Fufu. He's known as the disorderly kid, right? The troublemaker. But one day, he sees a little girl who doesn't have any lunch. And without saying a thing, he just gives her his. But then, this new feeling, this empathy, it's so overwhelming he can't handle it. He just runs away and bursts into tears. And for Montessori, this was the key. The goodness, the kindness, it was in him all along. It was just buried deep down by a system that never gave it a chance to breathe.
So, how did she figure all this out? Well, it wasn't just some philosophical theory. Her journey started somewhere completely unexpected. And what she found there, well, it was about to turn the entire world of education completely upside down.
So get this. When she started out, she was a doctor in a psychiatric clinic. And her very first students were children that society had totally given up on. They were labeled deficient, idiotic, basically unteachable. They were just living in these bare, empty asylum rooms with nothing, absolutely nothing to do, nothing to touch, nothing to spark their minds.
And this is where you really see her scientific mind at work. This wasn't some fuzzy, feel-good idea. She approached education like a scientist. She observed, she recorded everything. You can see it in charts like this one. She was meticulously tracking development, looking for the key, the path to unlock the world that was hidden inside each of these children.
And the results were, they were just staggering. To everyone looking in from the outside, it seemed like a miracle. These children, the ones who were considered unteachable, they started learning to read and write using her methods. And they didn't just learn a little. They got so good that they were passing the same public school exams as quote-unquote normal kids.
And this is where her big revelation hits. The real miracle, she realized, wasn't that the asylum children had achieved so much. The real tragedy was that the so-called normal children were being held back, suffocated by the system. The problem wasn't the kids, it was the school.
So, armed with this incredible insight, she set out to build a completely new kind of school. A place designed not to suffocate a child's spirit, but to let it flourish. She called it the Children's House.
And where did she set up this grand experiment? Not in some fancy, wealthy neighborhood. No, she went to San Lorenzo, one of the poorest, most run-down districts in Rome. It was a place full of tenement buildings, and there she opened her first Casa dei Bambini, the Children's House, for the kids of parents who worked all day.
Now, the real secret sauce of this new school was the materials. And these were not just toys. Every single object was scientifically designed. The brilliant part is that they had what she called a control of error built right in, so a child could figure out their own mistakes. A cylinder just won't fit into the wrong hole. You don't need a teacher to tell you that. The object itself teaches you. This is what she called auto-education, the child teaching themselves.
And it wasn't just the materials. She rethought the entire classroom. Everything was built for kids. Child-sized tables and chairs, so they could be independent. Shelves were low so they could reach everything themselves. They were free to get up and move around, to choose what they wanted to work on. They even had tools for real-life skills, like washing or dressing. The whole place was what she called a prepared environment, a space designed for discovery.
Okay, but this brings up a huge question, right? It's something that stumped educators back then, and honestly, it still confuses a lot of people today. If the kids are just free to do whatever they want, where's the discipline? Well, Montessori's answer was to completely redefine what discipline even means. For her, real discipline wasn't about being silent and still because you're forced to be. It was what she called active discipline. It's that incredible, focused calm you see in a child who's totally lost in something they chose to do. It comes from freedom, it's not something you impose on freedom.
And that, of course, changes the teacher's job completely. I mean, look at this comparison. The old teacher was an active commander, shouting orders. The Montessori directress, as she called her, was more of a passive observer. Instead of telling kids what to do, she just prepared the environment. Instead of pointing out every mistake, she let the materials and the work allow for self-correction. The teacher was no longer the star of the show, she was a helpful guide waiting in the wings.
You can see the effect this had in another one of her stories. There was a little boy who earned a silver cross as a prize for good work, and he just drops it, totally indifferent. Another boy, who's being punished and has nothing to do, picks it up. The first kid just tells him, "You can have it." The prize, the reward, it meant nothing. Why? Because the real joy, the real satisfaction, came from the work he was doing, not from a sticker or a medal.
So when you give kids this kind of freedom in this kind of environment, their abilities don't just emerge. Montessori said they explode. And nowhere is this more clear than in what she called the explosion into writing.
So think about how we usually teach writing. It's all drills, right? Copying letters over and over. In the children's house, they did something totally different. First, the kids would prepare by tracing sandpaper letters with their fingers. So they're learning the shape and the sound through touch. Then they develop muscle control by tracing geometric shapes. And then the magic happens. One day, all on their own, a child just puts it all together. They realize they can combine these skills and they just start writing. No one forced them.
See, it wasn't a lesson in the traditional sense. It was a discovery. It was a spontaneous conquest, as she put it. The child conquers writing for themselves when they are ready, and this became a hallmark of her entire method. It was proof that learning isn't something you force into a child. It's a natural process, just waiting for the right conditions to happen.
So why are we still talking about this today? Why does a 100-year-old idea still feel so revolutionary? Well, it's because it's built on a profound respect for the child as an individual. It redefines the teacher not as a boss, but as a humble guide. It proves that real, deep order can actually come from liberty. But most of all, it places the source of learning right where it belongs, inside the child's own spirit.
And so, Montessori's work leaves all of us with a really powerful question to think about. What if the whole point of education isn't to build or to impose something onto a child? What if our only job is to simply aid the beautiful, natural unfolding of a human life?